Today, I sat down and talked with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. We talked about his relationship with God and how to stand up and do the right thing in the face of great opposition. You're going to want to check this out. We're just going to start talking because I don't think you need much of an intro. I am here with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I cannot believe it. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me back.
I just want to say I'm so proud of you, and maybe it's because I'm hormonal because I just had a baby, but
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I have 3 children, and because of your work, so many mothers, their kids are healthy because you've helped inform parents about the dangers of vaccines and just everything going on in big pharma, big food. So I want to say thank you for that, first and foremost.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's such an important message, and not a lot of people want to talk about it because when you talk about it, you put a target on your back. And I think one of the first things I want to ask you is, how does someone stand up and do the right thing when they know that they're going to face great opposition when they do it?
Well, first of all, your mom and Marcus were the templates for courage during COVID. They were this was one of the only platforms where I could actually come and tell the truth on television. It's probably the only platform. And I was speaking to such a large audience, and they paid a price for that, and but they told the truth. And now, that I think the answer is that you have to have some kind of spiritual commitment, because the punishment and the disincentives for telling the truth are often overwhelming if you are just living in the material world.
Yes.
I was raised with I'll tell you, my dad had a conversation with me about 2 weeks before he died, where he gave me a book. And it was a book by Camus, and it was called The Plague. And he had me in his bedroom, and he handed me that book, and he said, "I want you to read this." I was 14 years old at the time. And my father often gave me books to read or poems to read and asked me to read it, but he said it with kind of a special intensity. And then 2 weeks later, he was dead. And so I, went through that book, read it a number of times in order to kind of unlock the message of the lesson that he was supposed to be giving me, or that he intended to give me. And the book is about a doctor in a fortified city in northern Africa, during an epidemic, and the city is embargoed, so it's under quarantine, and nobody can come in and come out. And the plot is around this doctor, and at the beginning of the book, he's in his apartment, frightened to go out because this plague has a very high infection fatality rate. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows how to treat it. And Camus describes the conversations that this doctor is having in his own head about why should he go out, because he can't really help anybody. He doesn't know the treatment, and he doesn't know any protocols, and he's highly likely to die himself if he gets exposed. And why not just wait this out in his apartment? And in the end, he goes out and he does his duty, which is to minister to the sick and to comfort them, even if he can't cure them. Camus, who wrote this, was an existentialist, and he was in the tradition of the Stoics of ancient Rome and Greece. And Stoicism was the iconic hero of the Stoics is Sisyphus. And Sisyphus was a person who did some great benefit for humanity, and as a result, but it offended the gods, and he was cursed by the gods. And his sentence was to push a boulder up a hill. every day to try to get it over the top. And he would always make it almost to the tippy-top summit. Just before he reached there, the boulder would always come back and crush him, mangle him, and then it would roll down the hill. And all night long, he had to walk back down the hill. And in the morning, he started pushing the boulder up the hill again. And he was doomed to do that for eternity. In the eyes of most people, Sisyphus would have been a miserable person, because that's a miserable life. But in the eyes of the Stoics, he was a happy man, because he put his shoulder to the stone. He had his duty, and he performed it. And in doing that, he brought some order to a chaotic universe in throwing his gauntlet down at the gods and saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do my duty, my job, and I'm going to perform it to the best I can, even if it is, even if it's hopeless and fruitless. And somehow that willingness to do what you're supposed to do brings order to an absurd universe. And my father believed that we should be indifferent to what people thought about us, that we should do the next right thing, and that we had to be indifferent ultimately to the world and to, what the Stoics believed. My father was a Stoic, is that we should be indifferent to our own desires, our own pain, our own, all of the things that drive us in the material world, and that our duty was to figure out what our function was, and then to perform it, no matter what the cost. So I grew up kind of in that milieu, and to me, every person that I've admired throughout my life have been people, who I read about, historical figures. They're all people who went through they went through a valley of the shadow of death. They went through periods when the world turned against them, when they were abandoned by their friends, when they became pariahs in their community, and they persevered. So for me, the public rebukes that as long as I feel like I'm doing the right thing, the public rebukes are a kind of gift, because they're confirmatory that, I'm doing something difficult, and that I should be, I need to be grateful for that and never feel like a victim, and never feel self-pity, and never, lapse into those mires. So, for me, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm very confident of that. And, my only other job is to be grateful and to be peaceful.
That's so good. And you feel like that gratitude and that peacefulness, your relationship with God, it helps ground you going through these difficulties, and it helps propel you forward?
Yeah, St. Francis of Assisi said that we should turn our lives into a prayer, and so that we're in conscious contact with God every waking moment of the day, and not just, pray by rote in the morning or at night, to turn everything we do, when we're eating, when we're exercising, when we're doing our work, and all of that should be performed as a prayer. And I try to do that. I try to keep God close to me all the time, and to continue to maintain that posture of surrender. I got sober when I was 28 years old in 1983. I came in really broken. And I surrendered to my God at that point, to a higher power of my understanding. But my inclination, like I think most of us, is that when the chips are down, God is very, very present for us, and we're willing to do what we have to do, and to invite him into our lives and to surrender to his will. But then when life starts getting good again, which my life went from being very, very small when I was an addict to very big, very quickly. And my inclination when the cash and prizes start flowing in is to say, thank you, God, I got it from here.
Yeah.
And then take the wheels of the car and drive it off the cliff again, and then have to come in on my knees again. And the challenge is, how do you stay in that posture of surrender even when everything is going well in your life? And that's the challenge, because so much of addiction is about abuse of power, and so much of the temptations of life and the bad paths we go down are all about following self-will, and about all of us are given, some power in our lives. And it may be good looks, it may be athletic ability, it may be wealth, it may be connections, it may be education. But do we make that asset serve a greater purpose, which is God's will, or do we make it the slave to self-will?
Yeah.
And self-will is always the enemy. And the challenge is, how do you stay in self-will? And what I try to do is I try to turn my life. I try to look at every day. God gives us this gift of time. But he breaks it into manageable units called days. And every day we get to try again to live a perfect day in perfect surrender. And I try to get up in the morning and then do the things, break my day down into about 40 different decisions, each one that now has a moral implication for me. Oh, do I get up, immediately when the alarm goes off? Do I make my bed? Do I hang up the towels? Do I put the water back in the ice tray before I put the ice tray back in the freezer? Do I put the shopping cart where it's supposed to go in the parking lot? When I first got sober, my life, as I said, went from being very small to very big very quickly, and I was running about 2 or 3 months later. I was running through National Airport in Washington to catch a plane that I was going to miss. But getting on that plane was mission critical. It was like the apocalypse was going to happen if I didn't get on that plane. And I was running as fast as I could. And as I was running, I was balling up a little piece. I put some dentine gum in my mouth, and I was balling up the wrapper. And I was running past a garbage can, and I threw the wrapper in the garbage can and made a perfect arc right into the center of the garbage can. But as I was running past it, I noticed that it must have hit something in there, because it jumped back out, that little wrapper. And I was like, well, that was God's fault, because I made the shot. So that's God's problem that it jumped back out. And I continued running, but then I got maybe 40 or 50 or 60 feet down that terminal, and it just started eating at me. And I put on the brakes, and I went back and I put that wrapper back in the garbage can. As for me, that, even though I did make the plane, but the most important decision I made that day was to do that, because that kept me in that posture of surrender. And that is the challenge for all of us. How do we stay, in that posture of God's will rather than, self-will? I have a friend of mine who says that the devil sleeps late. And he says it's really easy to be a good person early in the morning, and then later on in the day, you start making mistakes. And when I spent a lot of time doing extreme sports in my life, so I did a lot of whitewater kayaking and a lot of first ascents on rivers that have never been done before, and also backcountry skiing. And particularly when you're doing a whitewater river, and you come to a big Class 5 rapid, you usually climb up on a bluff above the rapid before you run it, and you study the water. You study the rocks, the obstacles, and you make a plan. You plan your moves, and you may have to make 8 or 9 moves getting through that stretch of whitewater. You might have to do cross-river ferries, or whatever it is, and you plan each one of your moves, and you plan your line. It's called your line. And then when you get in the river, if you can stay on that line, you're going to be safe. But a lot of times you'll wash out, and then you're at the mercy of the river. And to me, I do meditations every day. And the meditations that I do are like standing on top of that bluff and watch and figuring out what my day is. You know, do I need to have a conversation with one of my kids? Am I going to make that kid feel loved? Am I going to have to appear in court? And when I appear in court, am I going to be doing God's will and be honest? And whatever the cost that I'm going to do that, I may have to write whatever it is I need to do that day or go on a TV show. Mm-hmm. I ask to do that and to keep God in my mind while I do that, and God in my intentions and in my actions, and for the strength to do that. And it's like planning that line for the day. And there's almost no time that I make that line all the way down, but I may make the first, 10 of the 11 moves, and that's a pretty good day. And then the great thing is I get to start again the next day.
Yeah. Final question. You've gone through so much in your life. You've seen so many things, but how has Jesus revealed himself to you in your life?
Well, like I say, I try to stay in conscious contact with God. And, I see God's presence in my life through all these little synchronicities, these coincidences that happen that should never happen.
Yeah.
This week, my wife was having a really hard time, and I was thinking to myself, we were getting on a plane to take the first vacation that I've had in 17 months, the first day off, and we were going to do 3 days in Mexico. But she was struggling with an issue, and I was thinking to myself, I have a friend who's kind of a healer and a psychologist. And I was thinking, and I had said to her the day before, I really want you to talk to this friend of mine. Mm-hmm. But we were now on a plane to Mexico, so, that was impossible. But I was sitting on that plane thinking, I really wish she had been able to talk to him before we went on this trip. And at that moment, the guy walks onto the plane and sits, and he and his wife, we were in the first row, and there were 4 seats in the first row, and he and his wife were in the other 2 seats.
No.
And I ended up trading seats with him, and he sat next to my wife during that trip, and and really said the words that she needed to hear to reset herself, and it was really beautiful. But that kind of synchronicities, happen to me all the time. In fact, and they're really miracles, because this chance of that happening are 1 in a trillion, right? And yet it happened. And I see that kind of stuff almost every day in my life, and I now sort of count on it, and I'm not surprised by it, but it's just a confirmation for me that God is in my life, and that, it's not an abstraction, that it's real, and that, we all have to walk with 1 foot in the spiritual world and one world in the material, 1 foot in the material world. The people who have it easiest are the monks who go up and live in an isolated place where the world's not around, right? But if you're actually walking through the world and it's coming at you all the time, and the opportunities for lust and anger and resentment and self-pity and all of the 7 deadly sins are coming at you every moment of the day, it's much more difficult to maintain your balance and your faith. And so that's, I need to stay in conscious contact with God every moment of my day, and that's what I endeavor to do. I don't always do it perfectly, but I try every day.
Well, I'm so proud of you. Thank you for sharing your story. It's encouraging. And I just love hearing how your life is a testament, how God has been there for you. He's always going to be there for you. And thank you for the work that you're doing. So many of us are praying for you, and we just want to say, keep going, because you're doing the Lord's work, and we're just so proud of you here.
Thank you so much. Always good to be with you.
Thank you.